for pandemic preparedness. But one lesson stands out. Too many of our citizens were left overexposed to COVID because of the slow burn pandemics of chronic disease. COVID did not affect us all equally because neither health or healthcare is equally distributed. We need to embrace innovation to improve the health of our populations and also to narrow the unacceptable health inequalities. We have become too fatalistic about illness and too focused on treating the already sick. The next frontier must be about protecting people's health rather than waiting for them to become sick. WISH's vision is to build a healthier world through global collaboration. This has been WISH's mission from the start, to bring people together, to develop, to promote, to disseminate innovations that can really transform the world. Nurturing the WISH community has become even more vital in the face of social and political upheavals across the globe. Thanks to the amazing work of Sultana Afdal and the whole WISH team over the next 3 days, it is my hope that we can learn together, inspire each other to achieve our shared ambitions. We can show the world how, in place of discord and division, collaboration and cooperation can help us meet the challenges we face. With the power of the WISH community, we can promote better health for everyone and broaden access to high-quality care for all. This is what we mean by healing the future. Thank you.
لقد تفرقنا لزمن طويل جدا. لقد كانت السنوات الأخيرة صعبة للغاية، ولكننا تعلمنا الكثير. باستطاعتنا أن نكون معا أخيرا لنلتقي وجها لوجه ولنبحث عن حلول للتحديات الصحية الأكثر صعوبة حول العالم. لقد حان الوقت لنتنفس الصعداء. ها نحن مستعدون، فهناك الكثير لنقوم به.
Aren't we humans remarkable? Adapting, innovating, curing disease. A global pandemic has placed a great burden on our health systems and on the people who care for us. But it has also shown what can be achieved when scientific endeavor is supported by political will. Brilliant minds have done truly brilliant work. But the pandemic has highlighted vast inequalities. Highlighted, not created. Access to health care has never been equal. We found ways to live longer, to live healthier, yet not everyone benefits from these medical advances. We can't all be exceptional. A Lionel Messi, a Mutaz Bashin, a Serena Williams, a David Beckham. But everyone deserves a sporting chance at a healthy future. We all have the ability to shine. So, what's stopping us? Together, let's breathe. Breathe in fresh air, free of pollution. Breathe and picture a world where everyone is valued, regardless of their race, their religion, their ability, or disability. Breathe in the knowledge that by working together, we can heal now for the future. Breathe. A healthier world is within our grasp. The future healing starts now. Through global collaboration, we can build a healthier world. A healthier, more equitable world.
في آخر النفق ويحدون الأمل بينما نستشرف المستقبل. لدينا ما يكفي للمضي قدما وللتماثل للشفاء. نحن الذين يقع على عاتقهم إيجاد مستقبل مفعم بالحياة، ولكن فقط إذا عملنا معا. هذه هي لحظتنا، هذه هي فرصتنا.
And we'd like to thank Morgan Freeman for his contribution to the Wish opening film, and we hope you're excited about the summit ahead. We're now delighted to be joined by Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of Tanzania. President Hassan, the first woman to hold this position in Tanzania, has been a long-time champion of women's health and economic empowerment. She served on the UN High-Level Panel on Women's Economic Empowerment, overseen several national and regional initiatives building women's entrepreneurial skills, and launched a campaign to reduce maternal and newborn deaths. Please join me in welcoming President Hassan to the stage.
Your Highness, Sheikh Moza bin Nasser, Chairperson of the Qatar Foundation, Highnesses, Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, distinguished participants from across the globe, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. At the outset, allow me to express my sincere appreciation to the organizers of this important summit. I'm confident that this gathering will boast presence of acclaimed experts, will be an avenue not only to share valuable insights, but will also be crucial in providing us with concrete outcomes to rapidly expand and scale up health innovations. In this regard, I wish to commend Her Highness Sheikh Moza, Chairperson of the Qatar Foundation, for the cordial invitation and for hosting this summit successfully, and has contributed and consistently over the last 6 years, during which time WISH has contributed immensely to the literature on health issues. In addition, it has played a key role in influencing government policies on achieving universal health care. It is indeed something that should make all of us around the globe extremely proud. The interest of WISH of having a fair, equitable, and health globe is clearly reflected in the extensive preparatory work that has gone into this summit and at the range of experts gathered here today. I'm witnessing firsthand the enthusiasm of key global players in the health sector to drive efforts to promote healthier and equitable access to health services in order to achieve sustainable development. Certainly, today's conference is a step in the right direction, and I'm in full support of it. At this juncture, I would like to say that Tanzania greatly values the partnership with WISH, and we are keen to expand our collaboration around a healthier, fairer, and equitable healthcare system for our people through health innovations in order to achieve the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, African Union Agenda for 2063, and the Tanzanian Vision 2025. And before I go further, allow me to convey my sincere sense of gratitude and appreciation to the organizers for the excellent hospitality and reception accorded to me and my delegation since my arrival in this beautiful city of Doha. Indeed, the excellent standards of hospitality have made us feel at home away from home. Shukran Jazira. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for decades now, many health systems globally have been facing an increasing demand due to changing patterns of demographic, epidemiological, and socioeconomic transitions. Globalization, urbanization, digitalization, climate change, and aging population have overstretched the capacity of health systems to attain health outcomes. The COVID-19 pandemic magnified these patterns and waged division in societies, with the impacts borne disproportionately by the most vulnerable. The old adage says, every cloud has a silver lining, and this is the case with the COVID-19 pandemic. Although it has taken so much from us, it has also given us an opportunity to write a new future that is healthier, safer, and fairer. The pandemic provides us with a worthy lesson that health is not a cost to be repressed, but an investment to be prioritized and nurtured. Health forms the core foundation of socioeconomic and political stability. The pandemic provided countries with an opportunity to enhance preparedness and progress towards universal health coverage based on a solid foundation of primary health care. It is disheartening to note that many of the developing countries did not heed the opportunity that COVID-19 provided to undertake an integrated approach, but resorted to fragmented financing, planning, implementing, and monitoring. This approach did not address the prevailing inequalities and disproportionate impact of health emergencies on marginalized and vulnerable populations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic's social and economic impacts were felt in myriad ways, making a one-size-fits-all approach to mitigate these effects working inadequately. We often overlook the fact that safe and resilient health facilities need to institute systems, procedures, and capacities that addresses prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. Why am I saying this? Because we in the Global South have experienced and tackled epidemics in the past through local innovations. And this story was not the same for COVID-19 pandemic, as most of us waited the vaccines from the West, thinking that that can replace the good or the innovations and resolutions, local innovations and resolutions. But we forget sometimes the excellent comes in late, or miss something critical, or is over-engineered. In practice, resilient health system has to earn the trust of communities it serves. We no more ask ourselves, is it well prepared the way we know? What are the constituents of the whatever is brought into our places? So we have a lot to know before we believe on whatever is brought in our places. So what many fail to understand is that most of our countries, the pandemic did not construe the health sector, but did cut across all sectors, and thus requiring an all-inclusive, multi-sectoral approach. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as COVID-19 slowly easing up, concerted efforts is what is needed to match the advent of new epidemics. I wish to advocate that The spirit of multilateralism must be invoked at all times when it comes to epidemics and pandemics. The injustice of COVID-19 should not feature in future calamities. The right to vaccine equity should be a right for all, not a right for few privileged, leaving a major part of the world out of the health innovations journey. And leaving a major part of the world out of the health innovation journey is injustice to humanity. We have to heal the future. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the future of healthcare sector requires improved health outcomes or innovations. Therefore, local innovators should be encouraged to develop their own sustainable path to improve health outcomes. There's also a need to increase evidence-informed guidance and policies in low and middle-income countries to strengthen health systems and improve their receptiveness to innovations. It is our collective responsibility to design and implement innovation that will improve quality of health or health services according to our circumstances and make healthcare safer and affordable to the population. Excellencies, allow me now to share some few examples from Tanzania. My country experiences in some of the health innovation that have demonstrated impact to the population. Like any other sub-Saharan country in Africa, Tanzania has utilized the opportunity of rapid increase of mobile digital technology to establish various innovative interventions, such as M-Mama mobile platform, which connects the pregnant women to the emergency transport to safer health centers. Manufacturing of mobile incubators is another innovation that facilitates referral of neonates from one facility to another. This initiative has significantly decreased neonatal deaths in one region. The next step is to scale up this innovation to the remaining regions of Tanzania mainland and Zanzibar. These two innovations have significantly served or saved the life of mothers and children. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, despite the progress made in innovation in Tanzania and other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we still face a number of challenges to enable their scale and diffusion within the health system. Such challenges include lack of skilled human capital, infrastructure, and funding to facilitate scaling of innovations, among others. I, therefore, urge you all to take this opportunity to seek ideas and discuss best ways on how we can address these challenges, especially when innovation is focusing to address people's needs and when we use locally available resources in order to minimize cost and ensure sustainability, and when innovation for life-saving conditions are readily available for non-commercial use, and when collaboration is key for success, and innovations that focus to invest on young generation will have bigger impact in future. I once again thank the Qatar Foundation for hosting this event. The United Republic of Tanzania is committed to ensuring that innovation will continue to be its priority in health and development. I thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, President Hassan, for those powerful and important words. Our next keynote speaker is a biochemical engineer, entrepreneur, and innovator. He's co-founded more than 70 life science and technology startups over his 35-year-long career. He's the co-founder and chairman of the board of Moderna, whose mRNA vaccine for COVID-19 has saved millions of lives. And he's the founder and CEO of Flagship Pioneering, a company that creates bioplatform companies to transform human health and sustainability. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Noubar Afeyan to the stage.
Your Highness Sheikha Moza bint Nasser, and Your Excellency Sheikha Hind bint Hamad Al Thani, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful to be here in Doha, and especially to be here at WISH. Gatherings like this spark the conversations and commitments that can bring about the healthcare future I think we would all like to imagine. One in which good health is the norm and experienced equitably across the globe. One in which disease is preempted and prevented well in advance of its debilitating effects. As the saying goes, adding years to life and life to years. And one in which pandemics are stopped in their tracks before they start. I think we can all agree that we would wish for that and more. Now I'm going to ask you to join me on a journey of imagination today, using what, in my view, is the biggest mental faculty we have innately as humans. Because our particular moment in time requires imagination, every bit as much as it requires ingenuity, resilience, diplomacy, collaboration, and hard work. I hardly have to say what imagination can do when put into action here in Qatar. Seeing the country rise during the past decades is a very good example of how large leaps can be made as a result of highly imaginary plans, the right resources, and execution. While we may be approaching an endemic stage of COVID-19, we've lost to this virus more than 6 million lives officially, and more than likely over 22 million lives if you include the unexplained deaths during the period that COVID has been around. And I believe we remain unprepared for future pandemic threats. Add to this the war in Ukraine with its far-reaching impacts, driving up prices in global food, energy, and fertilizer markets that increase the cost of living to levels not seen in more than a generation. Inflation worsening even further by extreme weather events like climate change. And all of that factor into converging to stoke social unrest and tensions that tear away at the fabric of a just and peaceful society. Now, imagination may seem trivial in the face of these challenges, and you may even consider it particularly strange that a scientist is willing to talk about fantastical imagination when in fact rigorous scientific inquiry seems to be at direct opposition to such fantasy. At my company, Flagship Pioneering, we think of these things as indivisible. In fact, we believe most big leaps and breakthrough science have their origins in imagining a future scientific possibility beyond what seems reasonable, and then subjecting that to the idea of Darwinian evolution, Darwinian selection pressure. This union of imagination and rigorous science work together in a future backwards process that reveals whether a previously unimagined possibility, what we call today impossibility, can become a viable reality. Critical to this process is learning learning to resist the urge to discriminate against these far-flung ideas, creating space for us all to feel comfortable positing and defending seemingly silly, crazy ideas, because they in fact are the seeds to the next generation of innovation. I am founder and CEO of Flagship Pioneering, a company of professional innovator and entrepreneurs that conceives, creates, resources, and develops first of their kind bioplatform companies to transform human health and sustainability. Every single flagship company, and we are now on number 91, internally generated life science companies begins with an imagining, specifically a what-if question. The point of this starting question is to imagine a future outcome or capability unconstrained by what seems possible today. What if we could uncover and use certain viruses that colonize our bodies naturally to deliver therapeutics safely and repeatedly? Exploring and eventually answering this question led to the creation of ring therapeutics. What if a subset of microbes that colonize our guts can be isolated and delivered in a pill to restore a healthy microbiome? This question led us to create Series Therapeutics, pioneering new approaches to treat often fatal recurrent C. difficile infections and other diseases. What if microbes can alter the health of crops, such that if we add them to modern seeds that are devoid of microbes, we would increase yields and drought resistance dramatically? This question led us to create indigo agriculture, which is now extending the science to enable carbon capture in agricultural soil, thereby decreasing carbon emissions and enriching farmers through a scalable approach. What if we could create detailed corresponding maps that connect all known proteins to their underlying DNA, such that machine learning-based algorithms could allow generation of novel proteins that nature has never seen? This question led us to create Generate Biomedicines, a leader in using AI to invent novel and potent biotherapeutics through computation at a fraction of the time previously needed by modern biotherapeutics. And one more. What if patients could produce biologic medicines inside their own bodies upon receiving a biological code molecule? This question led us to found LS18. We have the habit of numbering our companies when they're born. Our 18th life science company in 2010. That company is now known as Moderna. I'm incredibly proud of our team in Moderna and their round-the-clock efforts to develop and deploy our life-saving vaccine. After 10 years in development, the pioneering platform Moderna had created and tested with $2 billion of private investment was ideally positioned to rise to the greatest biological threat of our generation. Over the past 2 years, mRNA technology invented by Moderna has been combating the virus, which in turn also uses RNA to infect our cells, pitting our immune system against a hypermutable enemy. In that battle, a simple code molecule instructing or arming our immune systems, now across over 1 billion people, provided a path to security, saving millions of lives, according to expert estimates. Importantly, Moderna designed the vaccine in 2 days, using only computers, developed towards the first in-human data in 42 days, and ultimately got regulatory approval for distribution in record time, about 10 months, what is widely documented as the most effective vaccine against COVID. But even more importantly, we did so with a commitment to equity at every stage. In the summer of 2020, we slowed enrollment of our US clinical trials to make sure our vaccine data painted a representative and diverse picture. This led our vaccine to be approved 1 week after that of a competitor. If we had to make the same decision to slow down our trials by several weeks in order to be more inclusive of diversity, we would do the same thing again. In October 2020, we became the first company to commit to not enforcing COVID-19 patent rights during the pandemic. And in 2022, to underscore our commitment to health equity in low and middle income countries, we updated our patent pledge to never enforce COVID-19 vaccine patents against manufacturers of vaccines for sole use in the 92 low to middle income countries. We are also alone in that act. To enable production of our vaccines in different continents, we are establishing what we call resilience plans. We recently announced our plans to build such a plant in Kenya with a capacity of over 500 million doses per year output to serve the region. This, alongside a number of such other plants, will make it easier for us to supply globally when the next pandemic arises. We also realize that we need to apply our technology to address many more diseases that afflict certain low to middle income countries. To this end, we're advancing a portfolio of 15 vaccine programs through human clinical studies that target emerging or neglected infectious diseases. We've prioritized work against pathogens identified as persistent global health threats, including HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, neglected tropical diseases, and the priority pathogens of the WHO and CEPI. We believe collaboration is key to harness the power of mRNA to tackle the world's greatest global public health threats. To accelerate additional vaccines, we launched a program called mRNA Access, where global researchers throughout the world can use Moderna's mRNA technology, manufacturing capabilities, and R&D expertise to explore new vaccines against infectious diseases. And we have a next-generation vaccine against COVID-19 called mRNA 1283 in development, designed to be stable at refrigerated temperatures for efficient distribution in developing countries. We just launched, as many of you hopefully have heard, a new bivalent vaccine to combat old and new strains alike, and we will stand guard on this front with new vaccines for as long as needed. Now, beyond applications for pandemic vaccines, the same mRNA technology and platforms being applied across an extensive pipeline that includes 46 human clinical programs, half of them in vaccines, half in therapeutics. What's truly unique about this platform is that a small change in the code of mRNA allows us to make a completely different protein delivered safely with the now proven nanoparticle technology. Now, as you heard from Lord Darzi, beyond the battle between the virus and our immune systems, what we witnessed beginning in the winter of 2020 is also a collision between a fast pandemic, SARS-CoV-2, and the slow pandemics of obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and other chronic diseases that are now alarmingly prevalent and distressingly unequal in who they afflict. The vast majority of those who suffered hospitalization or death from COVID had one or more of these underlying conditions. Take diabetes. 1 in 4 African Americans in the US suffer from the disease, increasing their risk of serious illness from COVID, while only 14% of whites in the same age range do. Hispanic and Black residents of Massachusetts, for example, where our company is based, are about 4.3 and 2.7 times more likely, respectively, to be infected with COVID-19 and 1.7 and 2.3 times more likely to be hospitalized from the virus than white residents. COVID's toll in the United States and elsewhere across the globe has been deeply, unjustly unequal. And the efforts for all of us in the room to advance human health are taking place against the backdrop of what we call a healthcare system, but in reality is a sick care system. We spend an enormous amount of time, effort, and money treating people once they are sick, rather than trying to help keep them healthy. A 2017 study of OECD countries showed that nearly 98% of spend on healthcare was for treating illness, leaving only 2% going to interventions and diagnostics that hold the potential to keep us from even getting sick in the first place. By waiting for disease to manifest, costs are higher, preventing many from accessing care, and outcomes are worse. Early detection that preempts disease or reverses or manages a pre-disease condition could offer a solution to healthcare inequities. Think of this as preempting or, say, delaying disease. The application of leading-edge biological science, such as what many of the laboratories nearby conduct, added to digital technologies, allow us to think of setting new goals for population health that complement our current public health goals. Advances in biology and computation, especially the most recent advances in machine learning, will make all this impossible actually quite possible. The same science, the same type of interventions, the same biomarker discoveries being deployed once we are sick can be put to use upstream of disease. We must decide to secure our health instead of resigning ourselves to getting sick and only then receiving treatment. We have all the tools to work back from this future possibility and make it a reality. We must only summon the will. Our goal should be to direct the molecular understanding and precision tools we've been developing to treat late-stage disease towards pre-disease. Can we think about eradicating, which means literally pulling up by the roots, disease? We've done this in certain cancers, many viral infections. Why can't we do it with many more? We just witnessed what disease prevention at the population scale can lead to in the form of the vaccine. And we know what treatments to diseases can do through pharmaceutical agents. But what we have yet to broadly realize is the practice of eradicating a specific disease before it takes hold. This, to me, is what we wish for. This is what we imagine for the future. We call this space preemptive health and medicine. I want to close by bringing you all along on a new exploration, calling on your imagination once again to ask with us some what-if questions. What if our governments took responsibility for securing our health the way they are responsible for our physical security through our national defenses? What if we could catch disease very early and use treatments that delay or completely derail it? What if we could detect the precursors that precede most diseases and then intervene or preempt them before they advance? What if we could measure our antibody levels at home, evaluating our risk and planning accordingly, especially when contagious diseases are highly present? What if we could design a global pathogen shield, developing vaccines for viral variants that have not yet emerged? You might think that's impossible. It turns out that you can pretty well predict the next variants if you have the computational capability. What if we could computationally specify potent antibodies, just through using a computer, designed to bind the most immutable parts of a virus so that we could very quickly arrest the virus's infection? What if we could, from a very small draw of blood, detect precancer activity in our cells as well as the tissue of origin of a precancer? Yes, preemption could even make an impact on cancer. Imagine a world in which most cancer is detected at stage 0. If you were to be diagnosed with cancer, I'm pretty sure you'd want to be told that you have stage 0 cancer, which means it's not manifest anywhere except through molecular characterization. You are moving towards that condition. Our company, Harbinger Health, aims to create this future with its distinctive approach to liquid biopsy. In the future, cancer diagnosis will become more like cardiovascular disease, we believe, a serious but manageable health problem to be addressed rather than a life-altering event caught too late. Once your imagination convinces you that there is vast impact to be created and tremendous value that will result, it's easier to summon the courage and conviction to put the imagination to action. I believe all of this is possible and even desperately needed. We can forge a future together where humankind is liberated from many diseases. This transformation is not only an opportunity, but a moral imperative, giving us the tools to extend lifespans, but even more importantly, health spans for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Afeyan, for raising those important and critical questions. A lot of food for thought there. Now, throughout the next 3 days, you have numerous opportunities to engage with this year's summit and its contributors, whether you're joining us online or whether you're present here in the room. This year's innovation competition finalists, some of whom you heard from prior to the start of the opening, can also be found at their booth in the WACOD Startup Zone. And you can also watch them pitch the exciting innovations they're launching to address areas of need on the QDB Spotlight stage during break from the main sessions. And should you want to briefly escape the action here, then you can check out the newly introduced Zulal Wellness Lounge. We'll also host a number of informal Agora sessions where a moderator and expert will engage with the audience around topics such as whether we've actually learned anything from the last pandemic or whether we're mindlessly heading into a new one. And of course, we'll have an array of panels, keynotes, and conversations focused around this year's 4 key themes: the COVID-19 legacy, sport and health, disability, and wellness. Now, on that note, I'm delighted to welcome to the stage the participants for our first panel on building health-resilient systems. If you could please join me up on the stage. I'd like to introduce our panelists now. We've got Professor Sir Aziz Sheikh, Director of the Usher Institute at the University of Edinburgh. Dr. Ahmed Al-Madari, Regional Director for EMRO for the WHO. Her Excellency Dr. Hanan Al-Khouari, Minister of Public Health, Qatar. The Right Honourable Patricia Scotland, KC, Secretary General of the Commonwealth of Nations, and Peter Sands, Executive Director, the Global Fund. Thank you all for joining us here on the stage. Professor Sheikh, I'd like to begin by asking you the first question. As we sort of sit back and reflect on what's happened over the last 2.5, 3 years, I suppose the main question I'd like to ask is, why wasn't the international community, why weren't our health systems better prepared for this pandemic?
Yeah, an incredibly important question. So, I mean, I think there are kind of 4 issues that strike me. One is that, really, if we look around the world, the majority of countries didn't really have pandemic preparedness plans in place. And if you don't have those plans in place, then you have to make up the rules under incredibly difficult circumstances. The second thing is that where those plans were in place, they tended to be focused on previous pandemics. So, for example, influenza, MERS, for example. And we know that this pandemic is different, so there are yes, there are some transferable lessons, but there are major differences. I think the third issue for me is that plans were in place, so I mean, in a few countries, were those plans sufficiently road-tested, stress-tested through simulation exercises on an ongoing basis, and trying to learn the lessons from those. And I think many countries fell short. And the last point is that pandemics are, by definition, global. And so national plans are important, but what we need is regional and international collaboration. And I think that was lacking really quite markedly in this pandemic.
I mean, Professor, I suppose the question is, you talked about those who were prepared, those who weren't prepared. But given there weren't any shortages of warnings, there were global warnings, reports written, discussions by many people, experts here in the room as well, who spoke about the fact that we're on the heels of a major global pandemic, yet it wasn't taken seriously.
Yes, I mean, I think pandemics will come. I mean, they've come throughout history. They will continue to come. But what we tend to do in healthcare is respond, I mean, in kind of very sporadic ways. So there's lumpy funding. Rather than sort of continuous preparation, it tends to be really as a kind of a response to the pandemic that's being encountered. So I think that is a kind of an incredibly important issue. Obviously, ministers of health are grappling with all sorts of other issues. And so if this is not sort of staring you in the face, then resources, I think, tend to get diverted. And unfortunately, I think we're already beginning to see that, even though we're not out of the current pandemic. So there are other things which are kind of rising to the top of the pile. Pandemic preparedness, resilience. I think in many countries we're seeing sort of interest being shifted already, I think.
And you've made certain recommendations through your reports about what to do in the short term, the mid-term, and the long term. And you've also called on the WHO to take a more leading approach so that we can hold the global community accountable. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I think the World Health Organization is an absolutely fantastic organization, has incredible convening power. And so their involvement in this work, I think, is incredibly important. I'm really pleased that we've got WHO representatives here today. I think they can play a role. I mean, they can help in terms of convening, sharing of information. I mean, clearly they have a pivotal role in declaring pandemics. But I think, as we move forward, we need to be better prepared. And how can they actually help support countries in developing those plans? Perhaps, helping them in terms of testing their plans formally, identifying weaknesses, and allowing countries and nation states to be able to be put into a better position. So I think WHO has got a pivotal role in that respect.
I want to bring you in, Dr. Matari, because when we talk about the role of the WHO came under a lot of pressure, especially at the early stages of the pandemic. But can you tell us what the role of the WHO was? Because, I would interview representatives of the WHO and say, why aren't you telling nation states to tell their citizens to wear masks, for example? But you can't actually dictate, you can only advise. That's correct, isn't it? I think you've got your mic just next to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this important discussion. It is my great pleasure and honor, and thank you for asking this question. In fact, since its establishment in 1948, WHO have been working very closely with member states, either members of WHO or other states that are not yet members, and global, regional, and national organizations as a global health leader, to make sure that every citizen everywhere on earth is receiving health care they deserve, they need, and focusing on the concept, as have been mentioned by our earlier speakers, on health before focusing on diseases. And that was the basic concept, based on the definition of health that have been given by WHO tens of years back, which is a state of complete physical, mental, social, health. It is not just absence of a disease. So that was the basic concept of WHO. Since that time, 1948, until today, WHO have been working with the member states on establishing many frameworks, initiatives, and introducing a lot of regulations to make sure that member states are following these evidence-based technical guidance from WHO. And one of the examples is the IHR, the International Health Regulation 2005, which have asked all member states to adhere and follow certain rules and regulations when it comes into dealing with outbreaks, epidemics, and pandemics. And COVID-19 is an example.
Are they listening, though?
That is the main point, in fact, and that's why, after COVID, member states have all agreed, based on consultations from technical bodies, that there has to be, in addition to this IHR, which is not a binding principle, by all member states, it is not a legal sort of constitution, to make it legal and to make it a binding responsibility by all member states. Whenever there is an outbreak, they are forced by law to follow that sort of rules and regulations.
Are you confident, though, that will be put in place? Because we did see so many countries go their own way.
I am glad now that we have reached that sort of level of thinking. And that's why, in fact, we have established, based on member states' recommendation in our last meeting, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, which is looking at that missing part, as you said, the legality of whatever rules and regulations WHO produce and member states need to follow. And I'm really very pleased that we have reached that stage. Now, this intergovernmental negotiating body is supposed to submit a report next year, but it is supposed to submit the final report by 2024, so that all member states will follow, and it will make it more legal. Whatever we agree in the World Health Summit, meetings, member states legally are responsible for following it up. And I feel that will be a very protective measure of WHO rules and regulations when it comes into protecting health of the people.
But how will you hold these member states accountable if they decide not to follow through, despite it being a legally binding document?
That is the point now, when all member states last May agreed, we need a body that will legally bind these member states to follow. If they do not follow, I'm sure actions will be taken against them. And that will be the proposal we are looking forward to have from this inter-negotiating governing body, which will produce that rule. We have many United Nations organizations that are really legally forcing member states to follow. And if they do not follow, actions or penalties will be taken against them.
I'm just going to call on the Right Honourable Patricia Scotland. I'm curious to know what you now know that you didn't know then in terms of the pandemic.
Well, I think one of the most important things we know is that none of us can do this on our own. You'll know that the Commonwealth is 56 countries, that's 2.5 billion people, 60% of whom are under the age of 30. And we had identified that it was likely that we would be hit by a pandemic before 2020. In 2018, we started to look together at the inequalities that were already present within our health systems. And what we determined was that the only way in which we would successfully meet the challenges would be by collaboration and partnership. And one of the extraordinary things about the Commonwealth is we're like a petri dish. We have some of the largest countries in the world. India is 1.4 billion, but yet we have the smallest and the most vulnerable. Countries like Nauru and Kiribati. Nauru has 10 to 11,000 people. And so we understood that if we were to succeed, we had to create a system which would leave no one behind.
But did it? Did it work?
It did. Well, it did in part, but I think we need to be frank with each other. I've said this on a number of occasions. We all may have been in the same storm for this pandemic, but we were definitely not in the same boat, because the inequalities that have been spoken about this morning were real. There were countries in our Commonwealth who had total coverage in relation to the vaccine. And those countries are 57%, but then 37% of our countries had no vaccination at all. And some countries, even today, are only 4% coverage. Now, that inherent inequity is something which we can, if we choose, do something about. We have 42 small states in our world. 33 of them are within the Commonwealth. They are less than 20 million people. Had we chosen during the pandemic, we could have vaccinated those 20 million people within 2 days, because we were vaccinating 20 million a day.
Why didn't we? Why did they get left behind?
Well, that's the question we have to ask, because when we are looking at what went wrong in the last pandemic, we have to make sure it never happens again. If you look at those three regions, they were the small states in the Caribbean, the small states in the Pacific, the small states in Africa and the Indian Ocean. Had we chosen as a global community to vaccinate those people, you would have had 4 regions which would have been free. We chose not to. And we chose because we didn't see, we didn't understand. Well, now we do. And
do you think that the Commonwealth, though, could have come together a bit more, that India could have potentially provided, or countries like Australia could have assisted some of those smaller nations?
And we did. We were the first Commonwealth Health Minister group to get together in the margins of the WHA. We set up a COVID-19 action group specifically for this. And we've now agreed with the WHO that we will have a plan of action, not just in relation to this pandemic, but all the issues that are coming. We have learned an awful lot. We used, with great effect, the Commonwealth networks, whether it was doctors, pharmacists, nurses, and together we demonstrated the power of the collective. And I really do want us to emphasize that the people here today, we can be the difference we want to make in the world if we choose. But it's not a question of waiting for others. We individually must choose partnership, and we in the Commonwealth are doing that. And I think what was said just a while ago is really important for us to remember. Everything is impossible until it's done. And there is so much we can make possible if we choose to do it. I think I've been told, and every innovator in this room who's ever wanted to do something new has been told they're crazy. You have to be crazy to make a difference. I think I've been told I was crazy since I was 5 years old. Why? Because I've always envisaged how the world could be, as opposed to how the world is. And we need to be very clear. We can do this if we choose. We have not chosen, so let's choose now.
Thank you for those inspiring words. Dr. Khawaria, I'll come to you, because in terms of lessons that have been learnt, Qatar's health system and its resilience, have you made fundamental changes in the way you do things and the way in which Qatar now operates?
Thank you very much. First, I'd like to say that I'm really glad to be here with you today, as building strong, resilient health systems is a topic that I'm really passionate about. As we saw during this pandemic, when health systems are overwhelmed, the whole society is disrupted. And therefore, investing in health systems and building their resilience is not a cost, but it's an insurance. And we need to collectively build this insurance. The pandemic has been a challenge, but it has also been an opportunity for us to test our plans, our resilience, and to learn to be better positioned for the next pandemic. As you know, Qatar did remarkably well during the pandemic. Our balanced approach meant that we were able to limit the impact of the pandemic on individuals and on society as a whole. We kept our population safe. We had a fairly active economy. Our children received education online until they could physically go to school. And despite high community transmissions, Qatar has the lowest case fatality in the region and the lowest, amongst the lowest in the world. We have also contributed to the global scientific understanding of COVID infections and vaccination through our scientific publications in respected journals. And due to the wise leadership of His Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, we are fortunate to have more lessons to share with the world than lessons learned in the case of this pandemic. So let me start with some of the lessons that we have to share. First, Qatar has focused over the last decade on building health system infrastructure and our national resilience to emergencies. This investment has paid off. During the pandemic, we were able to rely on our strong healthcare system to respond to the challenge and flexibly adapt our plans to the changing needs in terms of creating bed capacity when needed, creating critical care space, creating additional beds when needed, and to go back to normal capacity when things went back down. Our emergency plans ensured that we had sufficient essential medicine and stockpiles in Qatar to ensure that we kept our population and our staff safe. And we adopted a whole government, whole society approach, which meant that we were able to work across sectors and reach out to individuals. A resilient health system cannot function without the involvement of the population and their participation and support. And our universal health coverage and free access to care meant that everyone in Qatar had equal access to health, reaching equal access to health regardless of social and economic status. And our strong primary care network meant that we were able to roll out a massive vaccination campaign within a few days. And our investment in our integrated information systems and our digital health solutions meant that we were able to reach our patients wherever they were and to monitor their COVID and health status in general and analyze the data centrally and reach out to them with better care. And in a period when little was known about the vaccine, we approached it from a very scientific approach, and science informed our plans and our decision-making, and we shared with the general public what we knew and what we didn't know at every step. And finally, our investment in the training and development of our workforce meant that they were ready to face this challenge. But there's, of course, a lot of lessons to learn, and we continue to refine our plans and protocols, and my colleagues will share in the sessions over the next 2 days some of the details of what we are doing to continuously update and review our plans so that we are better prepared for the next pandemic. But if you allow me, I'd like to highlight 3 global opportunities that we together should invest in to ensure that our health systems are resilient and that globally we are much more resilient to any future public health emergency. First, as my colleagues said, pandemics do not respect borders, and we must work together to build our collective global health resilience and make collective efforts to remove all social determinants of health across borders. We saw from the independent panel review that was co-chaired by Her Honourable Helen Clark that we collectively did not succeed. It was actually a very damning report. We collectively failed, but we individually have done a great effort. So we need to invest much more on our collective effort. And Qatar, through its government arm, the Qatar Fund, and its charities, invests heavily in global healthcare resilience at individual country level, but also globally at the WHO and UN agencies. Second, previous pandemics did not address sufficiently, or previous pandemic plans did not address sufficiently the role and social responsibility of individuals. Her Highness eloquently said that in the opening remarks, that individual society responsibility and individual responsibility is really important. And we saw that in COVID, where we did not take our society with us. We had bigger challenges to implementing COVID measures. So the role of the individuals and the social responsibility of the individuals need to be better planned in future pandemic plans.
If I can ask you, Doctor, what is the biggest takeaway for you personally from this pandemic?
Well, there's a lot. First, it taught me and my colleagues that the effort we put in all our resilience plans, all our development really paid off. So in Qatar, we had been preparing for public health emergencies and for general emergencies, national emergencies, and that plan really paid off. And therefore, we need to take planning very seriously as countries. And when we get guidance and advice from organizations like WHO and others on how we should prepare for any public health emergencies or any disasters, we really need to take that seriously, and we need to prepare and not shove that as something that may or may not happen. So that's, I think, the biggest takeaway. And one other item I wanted to highlight, which I'm really glad the conference today will be focusing on, is that over the last 3 years, the long fight against the COVID pandemic has had a very strong or a very important toll on healthcare workers in terms of their mental health, their physical health, and their social well-being. So I'm really glad that the conference tomorrow will be focusing on the mental health care of workers.
Thank you, Dr. Al-Khouari. Before I come to you, Peter, I just want to show our audience a recent Wish YouGov survey of healthcare practitioners from 6 countries and the results of that, just on the back of what Dr. Al-Khouari was saying. Now, this group, once we get it up there, highlighted a lack of financing, insufficient staffing, and lack of leadership as the 3 top factors preventing health system resilience. Peter, I just want your response to this, because obviously insufficient staffing we saw across the board in countries everywhere. But what I also find really interesting here is the lack of leadership that, you know, in order to, and we heard President Hassan say, in order for populations to succeed, they need to have trust in their health systems, and part of that is leadership.
Can I still that? Thank you. Well, let me start just by saying it's a great honor to be here, and I want to acknowledge the leadership and contribution of Her Excellency and Qatar. Before I get to the question about sort of insufficient staffing, health systems and so on, I just want to make one basic point, which is that I think if we try and solve the problem of pandemic preparedness as if it's a siloed part of the health system, we're dooming ourselves to failure. It's not going to work. Because, frankly, people aren't going to be interested in investing over the longer term in something where success is defined as nothing happening. We've seen it again and again and again. It runs out of steam. We've got to get smarter at simultaneously delivering things that people care about now, i.e. saving lives, reducing infections on diseases that exist now, while building that resilience against future threats. And that's not just a theoretical aspiration, it's absolutely doable, because when it comes down to it, it is the same health workers. It's the same laboratories, it's the same supply chains, it's the same clinics that fight the existing diseases as fight the new threats. And so and we saw that with COVID-19 actually. Many countries' COVID-19 responses were built off the back of the infrastructure they had put in place to fight diseases like tuberculosis or HIV or malaria. The second thing, and here I want to build on Dr. Kouari's comments, is that and also Dr. Afeyan's earlier ones, is we need to think broader than just the narrow conception of a health system. Because there are these other actors. Private sector providers play a very big part in many countries, but critically, and this is to the point about trust, communities play a huge role. And many of the failures, particularly in the richer countries of the world around the COVID-19 response, were based on the fact that the public didn't trust what the authorities were having to say. And if you don't build that trust through the work of communities and the engagement of communities before a pandemic strikes, it's kind of too late to try and do it.
They didn't trust vaccines. There were some communities that had vaccine hesitancy as well.
But fundamentally, the trust was not believing the voices that told them what was good and what was bad. It wasn't so much whether they trusted the
health or the vaccine.
Thing. It was more about, did they believe what people were saying to them? And trust is a critical asset. If you look at which countries did well in the COVID-19 response, trust in the authorities was a massive factor. Now you build that trust by delivering for people. You build it by countering the things that are killing their children or their families now and helping them now, and by building engagement with communities. And I think by kind of sometimes over-medicalizing and over-centralizing the way we think about this, we've lost the sense of what that trust is. And can I raise one issue which I think comes to this point of sort of trust? We talk a lot, and it's absolutely right to talk about the inequities in pandemic response. So who gets vaccines and who doesn't, who gets treatments and who doesn't. Yet there's another level of inequity, which is who gets to say what counts as a pandemic? So this year, for example, in the world, roughly as many people will die of tuberculosis as will die of COVID-19. Yet, when you think about how much we're investing in COVID-19, in the R&D, in the political capital around it, versus what we're investing in tuberculosis, I'm afraid to say there's just no comparison. And when it comes down to it, that's because the people who die of TB are the poorest. They're the marginalized. They're the ones without voice. So when the same was true of HIV/AIDS. For a while, we called it a pandemic, and then when it stopped killing people in rich countries, we kind of changed the terminology. So as we think about the threats to human health and communities, we need to challenge ourselves to ask the equity question right at the start, not just at the point when we're talking about the distribution of medicines.
So who does get to define that? I mean, should the WHO be looking at defining other things that are impacting things like tuberculosis as a pandemic as well?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, according to the system WHO follows when it comes into labeling such diseases as either a simple outbreak or epidemic or a pandemic like COVID-19, there is a group of technical experts from around the globe. They meet, they look at each individual sort of outbreaks based on the scale, based on the numbers, based on the fatality, the transmissibility of the disease. And based on their expertise, they provide a sort of guidance to the Director General And then based on that guidance, the Director General will also look at certain key issues and areas. Then he will declare this is a pandemic, or it is an epidemic, or it is just a simple outbreak. But I fully agree with the point that you have raised. When we look at the number of deaths due to COVID, and the deaths that are due to non-communicable diseases, for example, cancer, TB, communicable diseases, TB, HIV, diabetes, hypertension, it's really far, far away than COVID. But the worry that COVID is a communicable disease, it was transmitted in a very fast manner between nations in no time, compared to, for example, TB, compared to HIV. So that's why mentally we look at this group of diseases differently than looking at outbreaks like COVID, like SARS, like MERS, for example. And that is the point. I think experts, they need to come together and agree on the turning point and when it comes into labeling diseases and outbreaks.
I just want to finally bring you back in, Patricia, Scotland. Do you worry that we're, as I mentioned there in my remarks, mindlessly walking into the next pandemic without actually heeding any of these warnings, without learning the proper lessons from the last 3 years, and we may find ourselves in a worse off situation next time? Are you worried when you speak to people, when you go and examine these health systems, when you speak to leaders, that we're just not doing enough, fast enough?
No, I'm not worried, I'm determined. Because if you look at what has happened, we are doomed if we don't understand our history. And if I look at what our Commonwealth leaders have decided in June 2022, and I'm very glad that the First Lady of Rwanda is here with us, because Rwanda is our chair in office. We have, as a Commonwealth, committed ourselves, heart and soul, to making sure that our response to this health issue is preventative. It has solidarity, and we are going to work absolutely to make sure that we learn the lessons of the last pandemic. But it does mean that we have to replenish the fund, which has gone up but hasn't gone up enough. It means that we have to work together, not just countries, but also civil society, foundations, all of us. Because if we fail to do that, we will not be able to meet the challenges of the future. And if you look at prevention, absolutely right. If you look at children, and we haven't mentioned a silent pandemic, one of the greatest silent pandemics is violence against women and girls. 1 in 3 women and girls will be affected. That's a silent pandemic we need to address. If we look at who was most disadvantaged, absolutely right, those with pre-existing conditions. We have said that we need to strengthen universal health coverage. But if you want to look at a child's possible future, we know that what a child will deliver by the age of what we give a child at 22 months will be what that individual will achieve by 22 years. If we want to invest in our future, we have to invest in our children. Now, we have to do it all. Can we do it? Yes, we can. We just can't do it on our own. And the one thing that COVID told us was that we are one humanity, and that what affects one of us affects all of us. And if we haven't learnt that COVID was no discriminator of people, didn't care if you were black, you were white, you were religious, you were non-religious, wherever you were geographically, Mr. COVID, as I call him, came for all of us. And we, the world, have to defeat him. And if we choose, we will. And wish is one of the great ways of us coming together, looking at innovation, looking at what works, looking at what does not work. And that is what we are doing in the Commonwealth. We're sharing our expertise. We are working out what works, what doesn't work, and we are determined to be the difference we need to make in this world to end it. Let's not make any mistake. It's in our hands. There's no point in us looking at someone else to do it. The people on this panel, the people in this audience, we are charged jointly and severally to change our health dynamic. We have the intelligence, so let's do it.
I mean, I want to end on that inspiration, positive note. But I wonder how confident you are that is, you say these inspirational words, and there are so many experts in this room who are tirelessly working, discovering vaccines and changing systems. But is that filtering through to the political leadership that we have?
Well, this is about partnership. So let me tell you what we in the Commonwealth have done. We have a partnership with the UN. We have a partnership with the WHO. We have a partnership between all our 56 countries. We are having a partnership with anyone who will partner with us, foundations, all of us, because we know that there's no point in having 197 different plans. We need one plan. And what I have said to all those who wish to partner with us is use us. We, the Commonwealth, are a petri dish of the world. You can see yourselves reflected in us. If you come up with the solutions, just like those who found us the wonderful vaccine, it was 10 years' work. It may have taken 2 days to do it, but it had the 10 years. We need to put that in now. So I am refusing to accept this cannot be done. It is not impossible, and we can do it. But what I do know is we have to choose to. So I am celebrating my 56 leaders who are saying they are going to do this. And I would ask everybody else, please join us.
Thank you. And on that note, I'd like to end this session on an incredibly inspirational note and a call to action. That also brings to an end our opening ceremony. If we can ask everyone to go downstairs for breakfast, and of course, you've got the Innovation Hub there as well as the gallery. Thank you so much for joining us here for the beginning of WISH 2022. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much.